Okay, so welcome guys. Basically I'm going through how how to harvest your worm castings. Now basically I had a bucket full to about so much of castings, and I've emptied it out into these two little trays. And what I've gone and done is I've just taken cardboard and put it in the bottom, because what you normally do is when you harvest, you're not going to harvest the entire amount. Okay, you're going to harvest only, let's say, enough so that you can leave behind for the worms to live in. So in my case it's these two here, so I'm going to probably go for maybe half, depending on how many worms are in there, or 3/4 of the castings left, and I'm going to put them back in the bucket. And what the cardboard's going to do for me, because mine is a bit too wet, okay, you might be able to see that because it's very dark and it actually looks a bit wet in the sun, which is all right, but you generally want to have a bit more of a fluffier kind of castings when doing this. I'll go through that in a bit. But because I put cardboard in, I'm hoping that the wet castings, when I put them back in, because cardboard absorbs the water, it will actually help the castings to become more fluffy again. All I would need to do in my case is, if it doesn't, I would have to just obviously check over a week or two, see how it's going. If it's still quite wet, I'll take a step back from adding water, or adding more carbon, like cardboard and paper and stuff like that. But at this point it's just cardboard in the bucket, and then when I'm done, I'm going to actually take castings out and put them back into the bucket and see what happens. It's a bit of a hit and a miss in the dark. When you've been doing it for a while, it's kind of common for you to see where things have gone wrong and how to fix them. And this is just one of the things that I know to try and help my system get back to its normal state. Also, with us in our area, we've had a bit of rain, quite a heavy lot, so I'm pretty sure that's why my stuff is so wet, not from the feeding. So moving on, basically the reason I'm doing it in the sun, when you can also do it in the shade, but with a torch. So even an LED torch, which is, can either go wide angled with the lighting, but you need something strong. So light from the sun is perfect for this, because what happens is when you put the castings down into whichever container you're going to be working through, you'll have all the worms at the bottom, and then they'll be at the top because you've dumped it over. Or the worms will be inside what you're trying to harvest, and you want to get rid of them so that you've got no worms in your harvested castings, which I've got this side already. So what you do is you put them in the sun, you leave it for about 5-10 minutes, or in a light area, and the worms will run away from them because they're nocturnal in this sense. They like the dark, as well as because the sun or the light kind of burns their skin, so they run away from the light. And what you can generally do is, if it's fluffy, in under 10 minutes or so, you're able to actually take the top section off without worrying about checking for worms. In my case, because there's clumpiness, because it's all wet, I have to kind of go through it all, decide if it's alright, and then chuck it across. Whereas generally, if it's fluffy and not too wet, it's just a process of taking the top 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters or an inch of castings and scooping it across, and just that's it. And it's a simple, faster process. And another thing to note is, on YouTube as well, you'll find a lot of people who've made these lovely tunnels where they've taken steel wire and wheels, bicycle wheels, rims, and made a funnel where they just turn this thing, and the castings go in one side and the castings come out the other. But on the other side, it's all the big clumpy stuff, and all the worms come out there. And in the middle, where shall I say, the holes are in the fencing, all the lovely frothed up compost, which you're casting, shall we say, comes out and falls to the bottom. So you have a catchment at the base. And in my case, that kind of system wouldn't work because my castings are too wet. If I wanted to get it back to that, I would throw more carbs in, carbs meaning carbon, and just allowing the worms to continue the process until it flushes up again without getting any water in there, and then that kind of system would work again. But basically it's quite a simple thing, for if you don't have such a setup. As I've said, you put it in a tray, you leave it in the sun for a bit, You allow the worms to disappear, because now you can see there's none, or I don't know if you can because it's quite far away, but you can see it's too wet, it's clumpy. And what will happen is you'll sometimes find worms stuck inside because they'll dig into the middle of it. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but you don't want to hear anything like that with your castings, because it's just like clay then, in a sense. And you know, it's fine, but I would prefer light castings because then it's easier to work with, easier to harvest. You're getting less alternative mediums stuck in it, like these kind of leftover paper which you throw back into your worm bin because they'll complete it anyway. You get a less of all that kind of stuff being stuck in your harvest, and that's something you just don't want. Now I'm going to go through basically the stages of when you've actually harvested. It's only going to be basically explaining it because I haven't completed my harvest. It's going to take some time. So I put my cardboard in. I would take the castings at the bottom. Let's see if I can find some worms. You see, here's all the worms here, right? They're all at the bottom. And you can see now they're actually running away. They're trying to get back to the bottom. Just cover them up a bit so they don't burn. Okay. And what you'll do is, by the stage that you actually feel your harvest is completed, you will have all the worms at the bottom with a bit of castings on top. And you'll scoop all that up and throw it back into the bucket, and leaving it as it is, because basically what will happen is the worms will go back down. And what you want to do is you want to take 3/4 of this I'm going to put back in. I'll keep a single third of that 3/4 in the tray for the last minute. You'll put the 2/4 or 2/3 in, and then I'll put food on top of it. Okay, just a bit, just to give the bucket some food and nutrients for the worms to eat up. And then I'd put some more cardboard on top, and then I'd put the extra castings, that the 1/3 I left behind, on top with a cloth. Okay, a damp cloth. Normally what you would do is, if you're starting a bucket off from start, like fresh, brand new, you just got castings and worms from somewhere, and you want to start a system that's going to benefit, and the castings are not too dry, or shall we say wet as well. You want to make sure that the cardboard or the paper you put at the bottom is damp. Again, damp, because then it gives a guarantee that your castings will not dry out, your worms won't dry out, and there won't be a problem. So once you've done that, you just add a bit of water at the top once you've got your wet cloth as well, and you put a lid on, and that's it. And making a worm bin is so simple. I'll go through that in another video, and it's easy to do. You're basically taking your scraps, which normally go into the dustbin, depending on where you are, of course, and you're making beautiful compost for your garden for free. The initial cost is obviously setting up your bucket and getting the worms, but the rest is such an easy process. The harvesting is a long process, depending, in my case, because everything's so wet and I don't have the machine for it, you do it by hand. But if it was fluffy and light and wasn't too damp, it would be literally a half an hour job, half an hour to an hour max. And the nice thing is you can start it, do the first top, throw it to one side, leave it for 10 minutes so that the worms have the time to get to the bottom again, come and scoop again, pour it out, and continue the process. And you can be doing two things at once. You could be doing the harvest, and you could be doing some folding of clothes. Well, maybe not folding of clothes because your hands get a little bit dirty, but you understand what I mean. So that's the simple basics of how to harvest your worm castings. I hope you learned something. I hope you understood me enough. And if you've got any queries, just let me know in the comments. Thanks, ciao.